Welcome to Righteous Minds, where we are tending the mind and nurturing the soul. I am here with my big sister, Regina. I'm Melissa. We're so excited that you guys are joining us for our show today. We want to continue our conversation that we've been having. It's been a very rich conversation, it has been a very full conversation. I've gotten so much out of it, but we want to continue our conversation about the church is hurting. This is a series that we've been doing it. I want to say about 3 weeks now. This may be our fourth week. It's been going on for a while. Our last episode, we were talking about the wounded warrior. And so this is the part two of that episode. As you can imagine, there's so much to talk about. This could literally be an endless series because there's so much to talk about with regards to this. But we've talked about the family dynamic and how that plays into a lot of our church experiences and our church dynamics. We've talked about how we approach the church community from a place of our own family experiences, and that our interactions with people in the church are a lot like a family. And so we've talked a lot about that, the impact that those family dynamics, our unique family dynamics, have on our church community and how we interact and show up in those places and spaces. We've also talked about the importance of us recognizing our role as congregants within the church community. And we talked a lot about that, about some of our expectations that we come with, along with our own generational trauma and a whole litany of things that we bring to the congregation as congregants. And then we went on to talk about those wounded warriors, so our church leaders and our church leadership, and their contributions to some of those things that show up in the church. You know, we've been kind of using the word church hurt, and we've also been talking about religious trauma. And they're not necessarily the same, but generally speaking, when we're talking about them, we're talking about them as though they're the same. And so we've talked about, you know, what do the contributions of the leadership have on the congregation, in terms of, especially when they make mistakes, when they are when we see their shortcomings and things like that. And so we talked a lot about that, including in that conversation the things that they wrestle with individually. So we kind of talked about a lot of them facing burnout, a lot of our ministers and our pastors and our church leaders facing burnout, a lot of them dealing with their own shortcomings and failings and mistakes that end up becoming publicized, and end up being something that we're all witnessing, and the impact that that has on our faith under their leadership in those congregations. So we touched upon that, and just how we can, you know, how we handle that as a congregation when we see our pastors and our church leaders falling. We didn't specifically talk about any particular names or any particular people, but we know that we're in a culture and we're in a time where there have recently been a lot of ministers that we're all hearing about, that have been running congregations, that have stepped down from their congregations. We talked about people way back in the day that had also fallen, and the impact that that had on those congregations at that time. And so we wanted to continue this incredible conversation. We hope that you all would send your questions or even your responses, because we know that all of us have our unique experiences that we bring into the church community. And many of us have our own stories about hurt. I was just in church today, and there was a lady that shared about she was in the process of looking for a new church simply because she had been experiencing some church hurt. And she was very hesitant to jump into another church, and was just kind of wanting to allow herself that time that she needed to heal, because sometimes we just need time to heal. And so, what we want to do in this meeting today, and this topic and conversation today is continue talking about the impact that it has on congregations, and then what we need to do moving forward. After there has been that, after we have witnessed the fall of a minister, pastor, or someone that we admire in the church, what are our next steps? What are those things that we need to be doing as a congregation to continue to move forward? So that's the conversation that we're going to have today in our part two of the Wounded Warrior. So, Mike.
I'm sorry. I think I was having technical difficulties over here. But, I mean, that is such a great recap on this journey. And like you said, this was really a difficult conversation to try to make sure we're being mindful, but being truthful, being authentic, and being sincere. And I know
Yes.
sometimes I imagine that individuals, a lot of times when people hear discussions, a lot of times they're automatically trying to figure out who are they talking about. But we're just talking about church writ large. We're talking about, I mean, I know a number of people over the years of me being in church that have had experienced all types of church hurt. Yes,
Hmm.
I've been a victim of the experience on the receiving end of different
Yes.
types of church hurt. Um, but I think that it was a needed conversation because ultimately we're concerned about those who get to the place to where, now we're using this as, for lack of a better word, a justification. Again, it doesn't negate that you didn't experience hurt. It doesn't mean that, it wasn't something terrible that you experienced, but the reality is that ultimately when we are not able to move from a situation and a bad experience, actually, we are clearly exhibiting that we are still dealing with the hurt and that forgiveness haven't occurred. And so, our hope is that in having this conversation, our
Hmm.
hope is that in hearing these various things, and even in us have experiencing in real time aha moments about ourselves on how we can contribute or how we are participants in this, we hope that you too have aha moments. We hope that, in some of the things that we've said, you said, like, wow, I hadn't thought about that. Yes, the leaders have so much on their plate. And do I manage my expectations from
Hmm.
him? Not just that I expect him to be this example and I expect him to be this person who is perfect, for lack of a better word.
Right.
But in addition to that, I expect when I call on him or her to be available. I expect when I reach out to them for them to meet my needs. And that's something that realistically, if we flip the reverse and put ourselves in that shoes, would we want someone to have compassion about us in their views and their expectations on us? So again, understanding we're not justifying any missteps or whatever, but the fact of the matter is that we, I can't think of his name off the top of his head, my head, but he says we fall down but we get up, and ultimately we're
Hmm.
hoping the leaders that fell down, that they get up.
Hmm.
That's one thing. But then also, when we are hurting, that we are able to move from the hurting. So I'm excited that
Yeah.
we're preparing to wrap up the discussion. I know that we addressed so many key things last time talking
Hmm.
about the wounded warrior, and the great thing is we have a couple more things we're going to talk about as far as the wounded warrior is concerned, and then we're going to transition and talk about what where do we go from here? We can't stay here. We got to move on. I'm hurt. My feelings are hurt. I didn't cried my eyes out and told the world like I'm just hurting. But okay, so what do we do from here? Do we throw our hands up in the air and say I'm just done with church?
Mm.
Or do we step back and look at it and really put things in perspective? Because again, man, he has no heaven or hell to put us in.
Hmm.
Man did not die for us. And so when we do make that decision to step away, we're not really stepping away from man. Ultimately, we're stepping away from God.
Hmm.
So, Melissa, I think we said we was going to be talking about and talking about the wounded warrior, I think we said that we were going to address when they have our leaders can possibly have untreated trauma and unaddressed shame that can contribute to them struggling and managing, either falling into various things that
Mm-hmm.
cause them to misstep, and or their inability to truly address, heal, not only because a lot of times when they're healing and they're dealing with it, they can be healing their congregation, or they can heal the people who are following them on their large platform that they have. They can use it. They've used it for all these years, to bring people in. So when we make a mistake or misstep, we can use that same platform that could be such a powerful healing platform if we can just be honest and deal with our um, address trauma and shame. So, Melissa, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about work that I do with clients. I have clients that come to me for a lot of different reasons. Um, some Most often than not, there's some trauma history. And usually that doesn't always come out at the beginning. So I can be meeting with them and I notice that they have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression. And I don't allow myself to be limited by what the diagnosis is. So I go a
Mm-hmm.
little bit deeper, you know. Typically, when they come in and do an intake, whatever they're reporting at that point in time is most likely what's going to cause them to get that diagnosis. But they're reporting within a very small window of time. So it's
Mm-hmm.
usually like 2 weeks or the last month. And
Mm-hmm.
so I see that, I tuck that in the back of my mind, but then I go, okay, is this a pattern for this person? You know, does this person have a pattern of depression or pattern of anxiety in their life? Or is it something that's just showed up at this particular point in time, the last month, the last 2 weeks, whatever, however you want to look at that. And you start talking to them, and or I start talking to them, and then I hear things like, I've always had pain in my life. Okay. Yeah, I remember I didn't grow up with my parents. Okay. So now I'm going, oh, okay. So this is not just something that's just showing up now. This is something that's been
Mm-hmm.
present in your life for a while, but maybe just now you're
Mm.
addressing it. Right.
Wow.
And so then I'll ask them, have you ever done counseling before? And 9 times out of 10, and I will say, particularly people that are within the African American culture will say no.
It's a
And they're also,
stigmatism.
there's, and they're, and many of them will also say they're very spiritual people. Okay. So I take all of that information and I go, okay, so you're not just having anxiety and depression now. This is something you've probably dealt with for a very long time. And here's what it might be connected to. And so as they start telling their stories of past experiences, then it begins to dawn on me, okay, is this real anxiety and depression, or is this more like PTSD and some other things? Right. And then I
Mm-hmm.
kind of help them to see that maybe this has been a pattern in your life that you're just now getting help for because you're just now experiencing how devastating and how difficult it is at this stage in your life. So
Wow.
let me just say, whenever we're diagnosing someone with a mental health condition, it has to meet certain criteria. One of the criteria that it has to meet is it has to be affecting your day to day functioning. If it's not affecting your day to day functioning, we cannot diagnose it as a mental health issue. Now, you may be saying that you cry all day and, you know, things like that. Okay. But is that crying all day keeping you from being able to go to work? Are you not eating properly? Are you not getting enough sleep? And once we identify that it's affecting other areas of your life, now we know that this is a pervasive problem. And this is something that we have
Mm.
to, this is something that yes, it's a diagnosis now because it's affecting so many other areas of your life. So I said all that just to simply say that we come into a church community with injuries, mental health related injuries. Many, you know, we've all been a part of a testimony service where somebody got up and said, I used to be on drugs. I used to be a gangbanger. I used to do all of these things. And we hear that and we get excited and we're like, oh, look at what God has done. He's turned your life around, all of that type of stuff. And there's value in that. The next question should be, okay, what drove you to those things? Because you
Mm,
didn't just wake up and start gang banging and wake up and start doing drugs. There were experiences that you had in your life that led you to that. What were those experiences? And now that you have this incredible relationship with God, what's next? You need to address that stuff. And the reason and the problem that we see often in church is that there's a lot of us that are wounded. It's really not just the wounded warrior, it's the wounded person that gave their life to Christ because they were wounded.
come on now. Come on now.
Okay, so we're all wounded in
Wounded.
some way,
Mm-hmm.
and we go into this phase where Jesus take the wheel, excuse me, Jesus take the wheel, Jesus take it all, and we forget, wait a second, I had this whole other life that I was living that was caused by some experiences that I had, and now I think I may need to address some of those things that caused me to have those experiences that have led me up to this place.
That's good. Mm-hmm. And
Does
we
that
don't
make
do that.
sense?
But we
We
don't.
don't.
But we don't address. Only thing we do, and I can recall having conversations even with our mom. Like it's like this moment I got saved. Nothing else matters behind. Now it
Before
is
that.
true that
Mhm.
Paul did say, forgetting those things behind, I press towards the mark. Let's we again context means
Correct.
so. But here's the thing, we can't pretend we didn't have those experiences. And we
Mhm.
can't pretend that those experiences may have left indelible marks on us.
Mhm.
And if we take the time, that doesn't take away the fact that we gave our life to Christ. That didn't take away the fact that when he said in John 3:16, he said, whosoever, that doesn't take away that you being part of the whosoever believe it. That doesn't take away
Mhm.
your ability to access eternal life. But what it is that it is us being truthful and honest so
Yes.
God can heal those things that are hurting. Because like you talk about the spiritual, by pretending that a thing isn't a thing does not make it go away. It
Mhm.
only stays suppressed. And I think
Mhm.
oftentimes, especially as us in the body, especially in our culture,
Mhm.
especially in the body,
Yes, indeed.
oftentimes we go and go and go until literally we are about to lose it
Mhm.
and not addressing things. It has to be addressed and we have to be honest. But God wants to heal us. But if we're pretending like it don't exist, you
Right.
like for real? Because
Right.
everything in your aura, everything in what you're presenting, everything in your
Mhm.
attitude, everything in how you talk, and everything in how you interact with people is not speaking to that I healed you.
Mhm.
Because I haven't healed you because you don't admit that you have a hurt.
That's exactly it. And here's the thing: we have memories.
Mhm.
God created us with memories, right? So
Mhm.
when you have had experiences in your life, trauma, we're talking about trauma, when you've had trauma in your life, you're going to remember those things. Now, here, let me just say, you may not remember them with your mind, but your body will remember them.
Wow.
Your body will remember them. You can walk into a room and hear a sound, and it will put you back in that room where you were sexually abused.
Wow.
You can walk into a room and hear a smell, or smell, not hear a smell a smell, and
Hmm.
it will put you back in the room with the person who physically abused you because that was a scent that you smelled on them when they would physically abuse you. And so
Wow.
we've got to understand that trauma is not just what you remember with your mind, it's what your body remembers because your body was experiencing something that it could not even articulate mentally, but it felt it. Okay, you felt those words, you felt that offense or whatever it was that was done to you. Okay,
Hmm.
and so when we're talking to people who've experienced trauma, we have to talk about those triggers. That there are certain things that lie within us that when we go into certain environments, All it takes is for somebody to look at us, for somebody to say something in a certain tone, for us to smell something, for us to see something that can trigger us.
Wow.
and
Mm-hmm.
and we don't always know that, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
always know that. But the person that has experienced the trauma, they know, or they may not know. So sometimes it's like, okay, I show up, I notice something about myself that's you. Let me use myself as an example. I was the other day, I think it was a week ago or two, well, it was a week ago, uh that our mom's birthday. And I didn't really feel anything. I wasn't really thinking about anything and was going on with my day. I got to Thursday. Her birthday was on, I think it was Tuesday, the 24th, September the 24th. So her birthday was Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
It was now Thursday. And I was just so discombobulated that day. I was like just all over the place. I couldn't really like get myself to like be in a good place. I almost burnt my kitchen down. I
Oh
was
my
in there
goodness,
cooking
Lord.
and something caught on fire. I was just out of sorts. I couldn't
Mm.
even describe it because I was just experiencing it physically. And then all of a sudden I was just like, you know what? I know what it is. It's grief.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having this grief
Mm-hmm.
experience
Mm-hmm.
and wasn't even aware of it, like was just discombobulated, wasn't paying attention. I would say I was on autopilot.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a thing. And you hear people say that, girl, I wasn't even paying attention, I'm just going through the motions, right? Okay, well, why are you just going through the motions? Why are you not mentally engaged in what you're doing
And present. Mm-hmm.
and present? Okay, that speaks to something else that your body is experiencing, and it has completely shut your mind off because it's too difficult. I've heard a minister say it like this: what the mind cannot contain, it will impose on the body. I
Mm.
agree with that
Wow.
100%. Sometimes our body is not allowing our mind to process things. And so we're just going through the motions and we're just doing things, and we're not even aware and present and cognizant of what we're doing. So
What
if
is that
you're going,
again? What the mind can't
what the
contain?
mind can't contain, it will impose on the body. That's
Wow.
trauma. So you'll find people that go into autopilot. We can get real comfortable with just greeting people in church and not really seeing the person in front of us that we're greeting,
That's true.
just going through the motions. Hey, good morning, God bless you. You know, this Christianese that we talk about, this little Christian language that everybody starts speaking, where you don't really mean the things that you're saying, but you're just saying them because that's what you always say every time.
Wow.
Like, this is how we go to church, go to church, go to church. And so you're saying the things that you're supposed to say. You're sitting in the seats that you're supposed to sit in.
Showing up how
You're
you supposed to
you're
look.
clapping and showing up how you're supposed to, but you have literally went into autopilot. And autopilot doesn't just get triggered by accident.
Wow.
Autopilot gets triggered because there's something happening inside of you that is a reminder of something in your past that you are trying to block out by just
Wow.
going through the motions. And so we have to recognize that that might be a sign that you are someone who has experienced trauma. Here's
Mm-hmm.
another thing. Often I'll talk to people about what's called dissociation. Okay. Dissociation literally means to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
When you go into dissociation, that is like autopilot as well. And it's a trauma response. You just literally shut down. Um, you're tuning out every ounce of stimulus that would create any more stress for your brain because your brain cannot handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can find, I mean, there's so much evidence of it in church, right? But we don't talk about that stuff. We don't talk about all of these wounds because that's another way to describe a trauma. We don't talk about all of these wounds. We're talking about wounded warriors, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about all of the wounds that we have experienced that are present in our lives because oftentimes we don't even recognize them. And we go into the spiritual bypassing, and we go into the, I'm going to make my this I'm going to just make sure that I look good and I sound good and all of this, and I show up, and people don't really know what's going on with me. I don't really know what's going on with me because I'm not even
Mhm.
talking to anybody. I don't have a therapist. I don't have anybody that I'm talking to regularly to be able to recognize this.
Mhm.
Sometimes not your perceptions being off, and we've talked about this in past episodes, that when we're not perceiving things accurately, that is a trauma response.
Mm.
When you're going into situations and you're seeing what your brain is telling you to see and not what really is there. And when you have experienced trauma, and we've talked about this, you see everything through that trauma
Trauma
lens.
lens. Mhm.
Hmm. So your mind is not going to allow you to see the reality. It's going to allow you to see what allows you to cope in that particular situation, because your brain is on autopilot, dissociation. Your brain is on high alert, all of those types of things. And basically what it's trying to do is get us to be able to function, even though we're not dealing with the dysfunction that has created the issue. I hope
Wow.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, because it just makes me think about what you said the last time about how our brain will make things align that's going to be comfortable for us,
Correct.
to almost like survival mode.
It's exactly what it is. And
Hmm.
when our brains get used to chaos, it doesn't know how to
Jesus.
handle calm.
Wow. Now, it is so wild how, not wild, but it's just how we are made, how our bodies are made. And just speaking to when you just mentioned
Hmm.
the thing about our brain, what our brain's going to do, an example. This is a physical example. Um, Someone I know had a stroke, and when they was in a hospital and everything, and the problem was they kept having to, so they started putting the person on blood pressure medicine to bring their blood pressure down. The problem was is that because their body their blood pressure had been running high for so long with no control, when they would take the person off the medicine, their body was going right back up to whatever the body had grown accustomed to.
Correct.
And so literally, in order to get their to try to reprogram their brain, they
Hmm.
literally had to like have them heavily sedated for a sustained period of time, because other than that, the person was risking having another stroke, because their body was determined to get back to what it was
Yep.
accustomed to. So
Yep.
just you talking about the chaos part, literally the brain was like, listen, I have grown accustomed to this
Hmm.
blood pressure being here. I'm not functioning right. I need to get to what I'm accustomed to. And literally, because we kept saying, like, why are they, and then the doctor was like, because their blood pressure, every time we take them off the medicine, it is immediately trying to go back to where it had grown
Hmm.
accustomed to. And so literally, for quite some time, it took some time, but it was almost like reprogramming,
Yep.
before they was able to get the person to where it was just a medication that was keeping their blood pressure steady. And I
Hmm.
had never heard that in my life. They was like, yes, the 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 blood pressure was determined to get back to what it was accustomed to. I was
Hmm.
like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, and it's
Yes, we are.
always amazing when, you start talking to people about how to be calm. So in therapy,
Mm.
when I start talking to people about how to be calm, it just seemed, you would think I said to them, go dive in a pool of ice. Because they're just like, what and it's a struggle. It's a struggle for some
Mm.
people because they are so wired and so programmed
Mm.
to chaos, and they
Wow.
show up in places and spaces, and if there is no chaos, if there is no drama for them to get into, one of the things I think I mentioned in a previous episode about the adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, and it has this laundry list, and it's like 12, I want to say it's 12 different things, and it's a laundry list. And one of the things, actually one of the first things on that laundry list, is that you are addicted to excitement because of
Wow.
the traumatic experiences that you had. And so, a lot of times, when we are dealing with things like post traumatic stress, or we're dealing with things like trauma, we get wired to that chaos, right? And if we find ourselves in an environment where we start to kind of feel similar to what you were talking about with the blood pressure, ourselves calming down, guess what we're going to do? We're going to try to get that rev back up to the chaos level.
Wow.
And so you find these people who can be in Christian communities and they're finding drama everywhere. Just anything that they can get into, any type of a match they can strike, anything, because it's difficult for them to sit and calm because they're so used to sitting in chaos. This is a real thing. And this is why trauma work can be such a lifelong thing. You know, there's so many mental health professionals, neuroscientists, a lot of people in the mental health community say when you're treating trauma, it becomes a lifelong thing. It's not, oh, I'm going to do 5 sessions and I'm going to be good to go. No, you're going to be working on this for a very long time because your brain has been rewired. And because your brain has been rewired, you don't know what your normal is or what your baseline is because you've been
Mm.
running at chaos for
Mm-hmm.
years. You see what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And so it's very difficult to trust people who've experienced trauma when they're trying to tell you, oh, yeah, this is what I like and I like that. It's like, no, you don't know what you like because you've been so disconnected.
Wow.
When you have experienced trauma, you live in a disconnected state.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you have been doing pre therapy has been survival. And like I said before, when you are in a survival mind, you are not in a logical mind. And when you are not in a logical mind, you are not functioning in a connected way. So in survival mind, we are disconnected from our bodies.
Mm. Jesus.
So to get back to our wounded warriors, depending on what type of environments many of them have grown up in, we can see that, and a lot of that can contribute to some of the shortcomings and things like that they're experiencing, which would be true of all of us. you
Mm-hmm.
know there are moments in my own life where I can walk into a situation and my brain will tell me, nobody in this place likes you. You should just go ahead and leave.
Mm.
And I have had to learn to sit with that because my trauma response was to always run away. My trauma response was to avoid. My trauma response was to sit and listen to all these negative thoughts about myself and believe them as truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would show up in religious communities, and if people didn't come up and greet me, and if people didn't come up and smile at me, I was like, this ain't the church for me. These people ain't even friendly. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
I was running everything through that trauma filter, that trauma lens, that
Mm.
if I show up and people aren't friendly, so I'm bringing that into this spiritual environment, this
Mm-hmm.
expectation that
Mm-hmm.
everybody be friendly with
Friendly to
me,
you, and you ain't being friendly, which
and I'm
kind
not
of,
being friendly. There
and
you
kind of
go.
talking about when we was talking
There
about,
you go.
last time, about the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Absolutely, we're coming in with that, with our own expectations, of which, Lord, only God can love us, I promise. Because listen.
But since I've been getting counseling, I
Mm-hmm.
can sit with those thoughts. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to act on them. And
Amen.
the thing about unaddressed trauma is unaddressed trauma becomes something that you act on because you think that's who you are.
Wow.
And you have to begin the process of therapy and working on yourself and healing so you can know there's a difference between what I'm thinking and who I really am and who I really want to be. And so I had to make that distinction. And so I can to this day still go into communities, church, all of that. And if people aren't being friendly or people aren't greeting me and all that type of stuff, I don't internalize that or make that about me to the point where now I'm misjudging and misinterpreting what is happening.
You keep going, I need to grab something really quickly, sorry.
Oh, okay. um So the other thing that we have to be aware with trauma as well is it is relational. And we talked about this the last time that we met. We talked about how trauma is very relational. So there's always going to be this relational component to trauma. It's not just I'm experiencing something that has nothing to do with other people. Most of the time, it has something to do with other people. And so that's where the relational piece comes in, where when we're thinking about our wounded warriors, we have to understand that if they have some unaddressed trauma very similar to us, they may struggle with having healthy relationships. I've not worked with anybody who's experienced trauma that did not also have struggles with healthy relationships. And so again, that's a part of it, I think I shared a while back, just being in churches, churches pretty recently, where I would kind of wonder, like, okay, the pastor should be more friendly and they should be more outgoing, and we have all of these kind of expectations of them. And I had to kind of come to terms with the fact that, okay, maybe they've got similar things going on for them that I've had going on for me, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm showing up and waiting for somebody to give me something that I'm not wanting to give. And so we can see certain types of behaviors that come up, where it's like, oh, okay, well, why is that pastor acting like that? And why is he standoffish, or why is she not? And so we've got to understand that trauma also has a relational component. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
part that we all interact with with one another within the congregation, is that relational piece.
Mm-hmm.
Are you I may be interacting with you and going, you know what, you remind me too much of my mama. I'm gonna stay away from you. My
Hmm.
mom would say
Wow.
stuff like that. And now you've gotten triggered,
Uh-huh.
and you're going to respond to that person from a triggered place. They don't
Wow.
know that they've triggered you. They're,
Wow. That's
but
interesting.
it happens. You can
Mm-hmm.
hear somebody can do something that can remind you of somebody. So there is that relational component that comes with trauma. So
Mm.
bottom line is, we don't always recognize all of our behaviors as being trauma related. And
Mm-hmm.
we come into church communities wanting to put the past behind us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that there's value in that. There's a lot of value in putting the past behind you, but there's even more value in being able to live in the present and not allow your past to enter into your present.
Right.
And
That's
so
good.
that's the goal of healing, is to not allow your past to keep coming up into your present. Not necessarily to forget it, not to just write it off like it didn't happen, but to be able to not allow it to impact and influence your present.
That's good. That's really good. Um, so okay, so we talked about the untreated trauma, and what about the part as far as unaddressed?
Shame.
Yes, that can be a contributing factor. And will we say that's uh, what makes it difficult for them to what be apologetic,
Yeah.
or what is that?
I think it is. I think it is. I mean, think about times in your own life where you had shame or guilt. And let me just distinguish, guilt is when you feel bad about something, and you feel bad about it, and then it's like, okay, I need to fix this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shame is not just feeling bad about something that you've done, but it's feeling that you are unworthy, and that you are uh it's devaluing who you are as a person because of what you've done.
Mm.
Okay. So, we in religious communities and the church, we talk a lot about grace. And grace is that unmerited favor. It's that, you've done these terrible things in your life, but God forgives you. He
I don't know. It seems like Melissa may have frozen up on us. And that's fine. She's going to be back here in a minute. Um, the interesting about shame, oftentimes shame can actually make it difficult for us to move forward if we don't address it. And so I'm really happy that Melissa is going to be just really kind of diving in a little bit about what happens when we have shame that goes untreated, and could be a attributing factor to, as to why when leaders do have missteps, or even not just leaders, us, when we do different things and when we're interacting with people, it's highly probable that the shame that we have, we know our behavior is inappropriate or whatever, but instead of us really coming through and just, trying to address it and move forward, sometimes it can just hold us captive, and that we don't move forward to try to address it. So what we really thought in trying to address the part about our leaders having the untreated trauma, definitely we wanted to be able to recognize that sometimes if they have things that they haven't dealt with in their past, not saying that it's something that, we're not saying that when we have our past that we're supposed to be living like I'm still that person I used to be. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that in order for us to be effective and to be completely healed, it is imperative that we deal with those things, those hurts, those secret hurts, either the secret hurts or the hurts that we are aware of. It's really, really, really important that we deal with it. And so sometimes the untreated trauma or the trauma that we may have experienced also contribute to can contribute to us feeling the being ashamed. And so, as we have thought about this journey, there's one thing I really wanted to share as we wait for Melissa to come back and join us, and talking about the impact of when our leaders, kind of let us down, which we know can, some of the things we discussed can be contributing factors. I mean, of course, you can have individuals who just don't care and they're just out there. I don't think that's how most of our leaders are. I think most of our leaders desire to do what God is calling them to do. But Dr. Charles Stanley, he said this: disappointment is inevitable, meaning that people are going to let us down. People are going to make mistakes, and we just have to recognize that. He said, disappointment is inevitable. He said, discouragement is a choice. And oftentimes when our leaders have let us down for one reason or another, or when our church members, our friends, those people who we thought were friends, or the sister, who fellowshiped with, or that brother who you was cool with, whatever, but somehow, some way, something happened and you were hurt by it. And oftentimes, I think one of the other issues that a lot of times we don't want to be honest when something has hurt us. We'll say it made us mad, but oftentimes the anger isn't associated with being hurt as well. But anyway, discouragement is a choice. And what is talking about discouragement as a choice is that it says, even though we have challenging situations and we have setbacks, ultimately it's how we respond that makes a difference. How we respond is on us. It's not on the individual. How we respond is actually on us. So again, remember, disappointment is inevitable. So our church, we I'm pretty sure we have disappointed people, and it's highly probable that our leaders, yes, they can disappoint us. Well, let's be honest, half the time we get disappointed if things don't go our way. But nevertheless, in those instances when there's been a misstep, we got to realize that yes, disappointment is inevitable, but discouragement, so we is a choice in that we can make a decision. I don't like what happened, disappointed me tremendously, but however, I'm going to, and understanding that discouragement is often an emotional reaction to being disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing is that we got to move forward. We can't stay there. When we stay there, that's when we're making the choice to be discouraged. That's when we're making the choice to be discouraged and say, like, well, you know what, that has discouraged me, so I'm not gonna food with them, or I'm not gonna food with church, or I'm not gonna talk to that person anymore, X, Y, and Z. And the thing about it is that being able to rise above the discouragement, it definitely it requires us to focus on some solutions. It requires us to focus on our faith. It causes us to have to go through some personal growth, especially when the situations are difficult.